Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming out today. I am Barbara Hovland, and I'm your Cerro Gordo County GOP Chair. As you know, it's a really important time, and I stress every time I have a microphone in my hand, I want to see everybody caucus. Really important to get you guys out there. Governor Christie is a lifelong resident of New Jersey. His wife, Mary Pat, and him have 4 children. He served as United States Attorney, and he had to face a lot of corruption. He's our man to face terrorism, gangs, human trafficking, and Washington, environmental pollution. He currently serves as governor, where he has done an excellent job at reforming public education, making sure that every child has access to education, and that's a really strong point. We are so glad to have you here today. Thank you so much. Governor Christie.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you very much. All right, thank you. But here's the good news. We're doing this in the afternoon, so everybody's home for the football game tonight, right? I told my guys, I have to be back to the hotel in Des Moines tonight in time to watch the game. So we got this event and one other one, and then we'll be back in time to watch. And who wants to root for Michigan State anyway? I mean, come on. No chance. No chance. We're the undefeated team in the playoffs, so that'll be great. I'm glad you're all here. Thank you for taking the time. Barb, thank you for the introduction. I appreciate it very much. And, I think that this whole race changed 3 weeks ago. We had an extraordinarily entertaining summer, didn't we? 17 Republican candidates for president, a bunch of governors and former governors, some United States senators, some colorful characters, a lot of really interesting stuff going on all summer. And it was entertaining, and it made the summer pass pretty quickly. I know it did for me, and I'm sure that for many of you who are paying attention, made the summer pass pretty quickly as well. We got into the fall, things keep moving. And then 3 weeks ago, we realized that while we all like to try to have fun with politics, because we need to have some fun and laugh with each other at times. 3 weeks ago, we realized once again that the job of President of the United States is no laughing matter. And the attacks that happened in Paris, I was here in Iowa when the attacks occurred. I went back to my hotel room at the Des Moines Marriott after a full day and started to watch things unfold on television, as I'm sure most of you did as well on that evening. And it just got worse and worse every 10 or 15 minutes, right? More people dying, just more craziness in terms of the description of what these folks did. And as I sat there watching that in my hotel room, I thought to myself that, the American people need to understand that this is what we're in for quite some time. I absolutely believe, everybody, that we're in to the next world war, except it's going to be different. It's going to be different than the other 2 world wars that we've had. This is not going to be nation states fighting each other. This is a radical Islamic jihadist movement around the world that very simply wants to impose their religion and their lifestyle on as many people as they can, and they want to do it through violent acts. And see, it's the difference between these folks, one of the big differences between these folks and Americans. We don't want to try to impose our way of life on anybody. And we certainly don't want to impose our religions on anyone. Our country is based on the idea that each person, in their mind, in their heart, in their soul, can believe in God as they see fit, worship as they see fit, and that no one will tell them what to do, how to do it, but we all will respect each other's ability and, in fact, God-given right to do that. The folks that are threatening us now don't believe that. They believe there's only one way, it's their way. All the rest of us are infidels who don't believe in their way. And that if we can't be persuaded, then we will be bullied and murdered into doing what they want. See, as I'm looking at you and I'm saying this, I see lots of you nodding back to me. You understand this. Why doesn't the President of the United States understand it? Why doesn't Secretary Clinton understand it? Why do they refuse to say the things that I just said? Now, in New Jersey, we have the second largest Muslim American community in America. Michigan has the most Muslim Americans as first state. Ours is second. I've governed a state that is filled with peaceful, productive, hardworking, good Muslim Americans. When I talk about radical Islamic jihadism, they know I'm not talking about them. They know they're not radicals. They know they're not trying to kill anybody. And they know that I'm not talking about them. Yet the President and Mrs. Clinton don't want to say these words because they're afraid to offend someone. I'm afraid not to offend someone. I'm afraid that we've gone too far being politically correct in this country where we won't say these things. And, you know, if you're a leader, you're supposed to give direction to the folks you're trying to lead. And by just being mealy-mouthed about it, you can't effectively lead. We know what we're up against here. We're up against a group of folks who want to kill us. And we cannot afford now for this race to anymore be about entertainment or fun. We had our fun. Now it's time, you know, it's kind of like the football game tonight. It's game time now, everybody. You know, the Iowa games in September were fun and interesting, and especially when you were winning. But now we're in December. It's time. This is when it really matters. And now we're in December in this presidential race, and we've got to get focused. I can't tell you, I sat a few miles from here to grab some lunch at the Perkins, and I had, I'm not going to say who, but I had 3 different people come up to me and tell me that they wanted me to get a particular candidate for president out of the race. And I said the same thing to all of them. I said, that's up to you, not me. Right? I'm out here, I'm working hard. I'm working as hard or harder than any candidate in this race. I'm on the road 6 days a week, either here or in New Hampshire, or raising money someplace else. And I put forward the most detailed plan of any candidate in this race. I'm the only one with a plan on entitlement reform. It came out with it in April. I'm working hard. It's not me that's going to get any particular candidate out of this race. It's you. It's you. You see, because none of these things matter until February 1st. All these polls and everything else. You know, I love people in Iowa and New Hampshire. They're all so nice, so courteous to you. People come up to me all the time. They say to me, Governor, you're in my top 3. You're in my top 3. Now, in June, I was really excited about that. August, it was really exciting. Even October wasn't so bad. Now, what I wonder about is, when the pollster calls you, which one of the top 3 do you give? Because they don't ask you who your top 3, they say, who are you going to vote for? Elections were held today. Who are you going to vote for? Do you alternate the top 3? How do you all do it? Or am I really not in your top 3? You're just telling me that because, heck, he traveled all the way here to Iowa, so we don't want to insult him. See, that's why I don't count on the polls all that much, because I don't think you all have made up your mind yet. Some of you have, but I think most of you probably haven't. And I don't blame you. You got jobs to do. You got families to raise. You got houses to run. Holidays are here now. You know, but now it's getting to be game time, everybody. And the thing I love about Iowa and New Hampshire is that you all get to see us up close like this. Once we get done with Iowa and New Hampshire and maybe South Carolina, then everything starts going multiple states a week at a time. And you don't have the opportunity to do this. See, so America is counting on you. And that's what I told those people back at Perkins. I said, man, America's counting on you. Because when Iowa and New Hampshire are done in the span of 8 days, you're probably going to knock out 9 to 10 of the current candidates for president. Probably 4 or 5 left by the time New Hampshire's done. And those are the only people that Republicans across America are going to get a chance to choose from. So you have a pretty important job. So, man, if there's somebody you don't want in the race anymore, don't vote for him. Right? Don't vote for him. Don't caucus for him on February 1st. Nothing in this race is predestined. No one has a right to any particular place in the race. No one has a right to anybody's vote. And so I thought it was funny, 3 different people at 3 different times, unconnected to each other, coming up and saying the same thing to me. I've always believed that Iowans and all the citizens of New Hampshire were going to do their job well. I tell people all the time that if you really want to have your faith in democracy restored, come to Iowa and New Hampshire. Because there's folks like you right now on a Saturday afternoon in December. I don't want to alarm you, but it's less than 3 weeks till Christmas. Yet here you are with me on a Saturday afternoon to talk about what's facing our country and who the best person is to lead us to face the challenges we face and to take advantage of the opportunities that we continue to have as the greatest country in the world. So it restores my faith as a candidate. That's why I never want it to change. I think it's great that Iowa has the first in the nation caucus and New Hampshire has the first in the nation primary because you all are experts at it and you bring your children. I can't tell you how many times I go to town hall meetings and I see children here, teenagers. And I ask people, why do you come? So, because my mother and father made me come. And then I ask the parents why, and they say, because this is going to be their job. They got to learn now, because they're going to spend their life in Iowa, they're going to spend their life in New Hampshire. This is part of the job of a citizen of one of these 2 states. So how do you make the choice? How do you pick? I would tell you that I think we've seen over the last 7 years that the presidency is not a position for on-the-job training. Now, I want to tell you, new is exciting. New is shiny. New is fabulous. It gives us a little tingle in the back of our neck when we see something new that really is special. And we like new things. New things are really entertaining. New things are, in their own way, really special. And you love to have new. It's like a truck, all right? You go past the showroom of a car dealership and you see that brand new pickup and you don't know everything about it, but boy, it looks good. Smells good. It's got all kinds of new bells and whistles on the inside of it. And you're like, yeah, I'm getting the new truck. And you go in there and you get the new truck. And then you take it back to your place and the rains come. And so it doesn't look quite as good as it looked when you pulled it in the driveway. And then it gets muddy. And then you try to get out of the mud, and this truck, the new one, can't get out of the mud. You're thinking to yourself right at that moment, damn, man, I wish I had the old truck back. Because that old truck, I knew it got me out of the mud. It got me out of the mud every time. And maybe it didn't look as shiny. Maybe it was a little tarnished. Maybe they had a couple of dents in it. But it worked. It knew how to get out of the mud. We cannot afford a new, bright, shiny object sitting behind the desk in the Oval Office, spinning around the chair saying, gee whiz, ain't it great to be here? That's not what the presidency is. We don't need a child behind the desk in the Oval Office again. And that's what we've had for the last 7 years. A guy who didn't know how to make decisions because he never had to. He was a community organizer and a state senator who voted present a significant period of time. Then he went to the United States Senate, but from the minute he got there, he was running for president of the United States. And then we made him president. Probably not many of the people in this room, but the country made him president. And what we've seen over the last 7 years is somebody who is incapable of making the difficult decisions, inexperienced, hand-wringing, doesn't understand how to lead, leads from behind. How amazing is this? I want you to think about this comparison since it's so present. I don't think still as of this moment, Sam, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I don't think as of this moment the president has said what happened in San Bernardino was terrorism. Okay, still hasn't said it. Imagine on September 11th if George W. Bush had left it to the FBI director in New York to tell the American people that it was an act of terrorism. You know how we were told this was an act of terrorism? By the FBI director in Los Angeles. The President of the United States and his former Secretary of State have still not said it. Now, I could tell you, as a former prosecutor for 7 years, right after September 11th, I was named U.S. Attorney for New Jersey by President Bush on September 10th, 2001. The job I accepted on the 10th became very different on the 11th, especially when one of those planes left an airport in my state and killed all the people on board. And I have to tell you, I was watching the coverage of San Bernardino for about an hour and a half the other night. I've been in New Hampshire. I got home that night. The attacks happened. I turned to my wife after an hour and a half. I said, "This is terrorism." And she said, "Why do you say it's terrorism?" I said, "This is no workplace violence." I said, "The guy didn't get in a fight at some party." I said, "And then go home and grab the wife and say, 'Hey, honey, let's go shoot the place up because I got in a fight with my boss. But before we do, let's drop the kid off. Let's put the tactical gear on. Let's get the semi-automatic weapons. And by the way, the pipe bombs we have, let's load those into the truck too.'" I mean, really, I said, I've done these cases. This is terrorism. And the reason I raise that with you is because in the world we live in today, we need a president who understands that. We need a president who, when he gets behind the desk in the Oval Office on the first day, and the first thing you're going to get, from what I understand, when you become president on that first morning, after, of course, you have the ceremony and the parade and the parties and all the rest of that, when you really get to work the next day, the first person who comes in to see you is the FBI director who gives you your morning national security briefing. Well, the FBI director is a guy named Jim Comey. And Jim was U.S. Attorney in Manhattan when I was U.S. Attorney in New Jersey. We did a lot of work together. And so when Jim walks in, we're not going to have to be introduced to each other. And when Jim starts the briefing, he's not going to have to say, "Do you understand these acronyms that I'm using, Mr. President?" Because I've used them. He's not going to say, "Do you know what actionable intelligence is, Mr. President?" Because he knows I do. He's never going to have to wonder whether I have his back and the back of the men and women who work for him, because I used to be one of them. And he's never going to have to wonder, when there's a decision to be made about whether to act in America's interest, whether I'll be capable of making them, because he's watched me make them before as U.S. Attorney. When to move with an investigation, when to hold back. When to seek search warrants, when to pull back. When to move in and arrest someone before they act, or when to wait till you can find out more. And then the decision on whether to bring an indictment before a grand jury. Do you have the evidence to make sure that the person doesn't get away, but spends the rest of their life in jail? I've made those decisions. I made them for 7 years. And so when he comes in, he's never going to have to worry about telling me any of that. We're just going to get down to business, the business of protecting the American people. And I'd suggest to you that the President of the United States has no more important job than protecting the safety and security of the American people. And this president has forgotten that. He wants a cheer from the UN crowd. He wants to get a second worthless Nobel Peace Prize for doing nothing. I mean, this is what he's looking for. Because you cannot make any other explanation for the president advocating bringing Syrian refugees into this country when the FBI director tells him and tells Congress, we cannot effectively vet these people. Well, for me, that's the beginning and the end of the conversation. It's not that I don't have a heart. It's not that I don't care about these folks. I do. I care about you more. And that's the job of the president. And so we confront a time where it is time for serious people to occupy these jobs. We do not need reality TV in the Oval Office, everybody. We do not need another first-term United States senator whose biggest job in their life has been running a staff of 30 people. They may sound good, but there's a big difference between sounding good and knowing how to make decisions that you are going to be held accountable for. When you're one of 100, you can always say, well, it was the other guy. I was going to mark the bill up in the subcommittee, but then it came to the committee, and then I voted the other way. And then it was cloture, and I didn't know how to vote, and then I went home for break. When you're governor or you're president, there are no going home for breaks. There aren't 100 other people who you get to decide with. There isn't anyone else to hold accountable, because the decisions they bring to your desk when you're the governor and you're the president are the ones that no one else either can make or wants to make. Believe me, no good decisions come to my desk as governor of New Jersey. They all make them underneath me. And then they come and say, we did this great thing, Governor, look at this. Now you can go out and sign this thing and everybody will be happy. Like, oh, great, okay. When they come in and say, we need you to decide this, it's never good. I was in Arizona a couple weeks ago raising money, and I was with the First Lady of Arizona, Angela Ducey. Her husband is now the governor of Arizona. It was me and my wife, Mary Pat, and Angela. We're going out to dinner after this fundraiser. And as I was pulling up to the restaurant, the phone rang, and it was my chief counsel in New Jersey. So I looked at Mary Pat. I said, why don't you and Angela go in? This shouldn't take too long. I'll just take this call, and then I'll meet you in the restaurant. Well, it took a little longer than I thought. It turned out I was on the phone for 35 minutes. And I walked into the restaurant, and for all of you who are married in this room, I got the look. Now, usually Mary Pat is really discreet about this, so I just get the look, and that's all I get until we get back to the hotel. Then I get the rest of it. But this night, apparently, she was less patient than normal. And she looked at me and she said, what was it? And I said, I took care of it, don't worry about it. And she said, well, was it good or bad? I said to her, Mary Pat, it's 9:30 at night on a Wednesday night. It's never good. They don't call you at 9:30 at night on a Wednesday night and go, hey, Governor, great news. Let me fill you in on this. Know you're in the middle of dinner, know you're in 2 time zones away, but really thought you'd want to know this really fabulous news. It's never that. And Angela Ducey was sitting across from Mary Pat, and she said, Mary Pat, we've only been in the job 10 months, and I knew it couldn't have been good. Mary Pat lost her edge for a moment because she was giving me the look. I don't need to be told that when the phone rings, it's not going to be good. When you're president, you're governor, when the phone rings late at night, it's never good. But if you've gone through it a bunch of times, you know what you realize? The sun comes up tomorrow. And so you make the decision. You don't wring your hands. You don't torture yourself over it. You get the best information you can, and then you decide. Because you know what you're going to find out the next day? Not only that the sun comes up, but there's going to be a few more of those to make the next day. And they don't get any better if you let them pile up on your desk. And they don't get any better if you don't keep your word. It's about deciding and moving on. Again and again and again. And for 13 years, everybody, that's what I've been doing. 7 years as U.S. Attorney and 6 years as governor, that's what I've been doing. And I'd suggest to you that now more than ever, after the last few weeks, that's the kind of experience we need in the Oval Office on January 20th of 2017. That we no longer have the luxury of picking the most eloquent person who makes us feel good but has never made a decision before. That luxury went out the window when ISIS shot up Paris and now San Bernardino. And I will tell you this, for folks here in Iowa who at times may feel some sense of distance from this threat, if a Center for the Developmentally Disabled in San Bernardino, California, is a target for terrorism, then any place in America is now a target for terrorism. Let's face it, everybody, this wasn't the World Trade Center or the Pentagon. It wasn't the Statue of Liberty or the Capitol Dome. It was a Center for the Developmentally Disabled in San Bernardino, California. It wasn't downtown Los Angeles or the Sears Tower in Chicago. It was a Center for the Developmentally Disabled in San Bernardino, California. See, ISIS is different than Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda wanted to make big symbolic hits that were going to make big, huge news. ISIS said what they wanted after the Paris attack. They said the only thing sweeter than this will be the taste of American blood. And they don't care where that blood is spilled, just that it is. You need a president who understands how to fight that fight. And the first thing that president is going to need to do is become president. And that means going through Hillary Rodham Clinton along the way. Because we do not need a third Obama term. And that's what she will be. Because this foreign policy that's gotten the world and the messes in is her foreign policy that she did with President Barack Obama. So we're going to have a debate a week from Tuesday, the 15th, in Las Vegas. It's apparently going to be that one time that what happens in Vegas doesn't stay in Vegas. So we're going to have this debate a week from Tuesday. I want you to do one thing, and I'm going to get to your questions. I want you to do one thing Tuesday, and I want you to talk to any of your friends who you want to talk to who ask you about what today was all about after you leave. Why don't you ask them to do one thing a week from Tuesday when they turn on that debate? You know, the beginning of the debate will be 8 of us, it looks like, standing in front of those podiums, looking goofy, right, like the student council election. We're all standing there, you know. And then we have to walk behind the podium, you know, and it's the whole TV setup thing, right? When we stand behind those podiums, there's going to be a second or two where they're going to have that big wide shot of all 8 of us before the moderators start to speak and the action starts. I want you to look very closely at that picture. And I want you to ask yourself 3 questions. Who's the most tested? Who's the most ready? Who's the most mature to be president of the United States? Ask yourself those 3 questions. Because those 3 questions, I would suggest respectfully, are the questions that need to be answered during times like this. Who's been the most tested? Because the presidency will test you every day. Who's the most ready? Because there's not time for on-the-job training. And who's the most mature? Because there are going to be moments that will try you and try your maturity. You cannot afford to act impulsively or immaturely as President of the United States. When you look at that stage, ask yourself those 3 questions. If you do, you genuinely reflect on it, then I feel absolutely comfortable in whatever judgment you decide to make. Because if you ask yourself those questions, then you're asking yourself the right questions. And many of you will come to different conclusions in the answers to those questions, but I just want to make sure you ask them. This can't be just some feeling. It's got to be really thought out, and America's counting on you to do it. So, now we'll get to the fun part. Fun part of today is you get to ask questions, I get to answer them. Unlike other town hall meetings that I understand other candidates do, you didn't have to write your questions down on the way in today, hand them to the staff, have the staff review them, decide which ones I really like or have really good answers to, and then those get asked and we pretend that's a town hall meeting. It would be wrong of me, it'd be not sporting of me, to say which candidate does that, but her initials are Hillary Rodham Clinton. So today, all you have to do is raise your hand, and I'll call on you. The only thing I don't respond to are questions that are yelled out. This is not because I'm governor of New Jersey or a candidate for president of the United States. It's because I'm the father of 4. Coming off Thanksgiving weekend when the 2 older ones were home from college, reasserting themselves in the house that the two younger ones thought they had taken over, since the two older ones had left and abandoned their rooms for college. And so this Thanksgiving weekend was unbelievable. Like, they were at each other's throats and then yelling to me or to Mary Pat, Mom, he did this, Dad, she did that. So right now, my ability to ignore things that are yelled out to me is honed perfectly. They have honed it perfectly. So you raise your hands, I will take your questions and we'll answer them. Sir. I think we got enough.
Of the talking heads in the tragedy in San Bernardino was what is the president going to do about gun control laws?
Yep.
It wasn't terrorism or anything like that. The president has talked about enacting more gun control laws, which did absolutely no good. New Jersey has some of the most stringent gun control laws in the country.
Yep.
What will you do? What is your opinion as president?
Well, first off, I'd love to blame the media, but remember, the very first person who said that was the president. Now, he still waited days to say that it's a terrorist attack. But man, the first comments you remember was, these mass shootings, they happen with more frequency in this country than any place else, and we're going to really have to do something. Come on, Mr. President. Stop. This is the White House, remember, that says a crisis is an awful thing to waste. Right? So they saw a potential, and by the way, Hillary Clinton did the same thing, and they saw this initially when they didn't know what they were talking about as an opportunity to push their liberal confiscation of guns program on the country and to use the tragedy of these people's deaths as an excuse to push their agenda. So listen, in New Jersey, we do have some of the toughest gun laws in America. All of them got put into place before I was governor. My job has been to make sure that they don't get worse, and they haven't. I've vetoed lots of bills. In fact, one that they just tried to override this past week in the legislature, which we survived an override, another override attempt of a veto. I haven't had one veto overridden now in almost 6 years, even though we have big minorities in the legislature. Only 32 Republicans out of 80 in the lower house, and only 16 Republicans out of 40 in the upper house. But as president, listen, I think this is pretty simple, and my experience on this has come from being a prosecutor. The real problem with gun violence in America are criminals, not law-abiding people. See, the criminals don't go through background checks typically, and the criminals don't abide by waiting periods, and the criminals don't worry about those kind of niceties. They buy their guns mostly on the black market. They get rid of the serial numbers. They use them. They drop them, and they buy other ones. The way to lower gun violence in our country is to put more criminals in jail who commit crimes with guns. It is not to restrict law-abiding citizens' Second Amendment right to be able to buy a gun for self-defense, buy a gun for hunting, buy a gun for collecting, or whatever other reason they might want to have firearms for. I don't think that the Founding Fathers, when they put together the amendments to the Constitution, that they dumped them in a hat and picked them out randomly. Like the First Amendment, pretty important. Freedom of religion, freedom of speech, big ones in the First Amendment. The Second Amendment is the right to bear arms. Now, I don't think they put it second, they put it ahead of search and seizure. They put it ahead of the right against self-incrimination. They put it ahead of the right to a trial by jury. They put it ahead of some pretty big ones. I think it deserves some respect and some deference. And by the way, these laws don't work. And if you talk about it in terms of terrorism, it becomes even more ridiculous. Someone who is willing to give their life in order to kill you is not caring about a waiting period, is not caring about any of that stuff. And so, to me, you can look at our state, you can look at California, you can look at New York. I mean, look at the cities right now where the murder rate is going up the most significantly. Chicago, one of the biggest gun control cities in America. New York, the biggest gun control city in America. Up 11% the murder rate, 18% in Chicago. Why is that? Is that because they need even more gun control? No. It's because liberal mayors have taken over those cities who are tying the hands of the police officers behind their backs and don't support them. I'll give New York as the best example. Gun laws have not changed significantly at all in the last 20 years. When Rudy Giuliani became mayor of New York City, in 1993 he was elected. That year, 1993, the last year before Giuliani became mayor, there were 2,200 murders in New York City in 1993. You then had 8 years of Rudy Giuliani and 12 years of Mike Bloomberg, who, despite the fact that I don't agree with his position on guns, he allowed an aggressive law enforcement force for the New York City Police Department. When Mike Bloomberg left office, and that was 20 years, it had gone from 2,200 murders to just slightly over 200 murders in Mike Bloomberg's last year in office. What's happened now that liberal Bill de Blasio is the mayor of New York and he's tying hands behind the back of law enforcement? Murders are up 11% this year. And they're going to continue to go up because he doesn't empower the police officers. In fact, he undercuts them. So I think that the key to violence control in America is controlling the people who commit violent acts. Those are the criminals, and we need to be more aggressive on mental health. Because a lot of these mass shootings, almost all of them, involve someone who has serious mental health issues, who are either non-compliant with their medication or haven't been treated at all. And we need to give physicians more tools, more aggressive tools to involuntarily commit those folks if they show signs of being violent and mentally disturbed. Not only to protect us, but to protect them from themselves. Because most of the time, the way those things end is the person takes their own life after they've taken others. Those are the things we need to work on in this country, not more gun control laws, which I said the other day on the radio, it's like cotton candy. It does nothing to improve the body in any way. But what it does is makes you feel good for a couple of minutes. So you pass these laws, you feel like you've done something, you get that little sugar high, and then it goes away. And in fact, it's worse than going away. It makes you a little less ready for the next time because it gives you a false sense of security. So that's what I would do on that. Yes, sir. Ma'am. She's yelling out, but she's the chair, so we're going to have an exception for that. We're going to have an exception for that because she's the Republican chair and I'm no dummy, right? So. Yes, ma'am. We need to put serious people in charge of these assignments. It's kind of going right along with starting with the president and going right on down. The good thing for me is I've gotten to meet a lot of those really serious people over the time that I've been in law enforcement. They're now scattered all over the country, alums of the Bush administration that I served with as U.S. attorneys, people who are really serious and smart. And by the way, so serious and smart that even the president picked one, who was a Republican, U.S. attorney and former Deputy Attorney General Jim Comey. So, you know, you got to put serious people in charge of these things, and you got to give them the tools. The president also cut back on the tools in a lot of ways, in the financing of the tools and empowering people to do these things. And now he says, let's take 10,000 Syrian refugees, which is nearly a tenfold increase over what we've taken in the last year, and he wants to take them in 6 months. So he wants to give those folks half the time they had before to vet these folks, and he wants to take in nearly 10 times more. It doesn't make any sense. No sense at all. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I would like to talk for a minute about Planned Parenthood. Not only they think they above the law, they take in, the kids come in with their prostitutes, they have their prostitutes checked over, give them abortions, and these young girls are released back to their pimps. And their ties with human trafficking. When are we going to cut down on Planned Parenthood? Abortion, there are ties to abortion, the selling of baby body parts. They don't give any counseling to these girls who come in pregnant. Instead of giving them the option of adoption, they tell them that, oh, nobody will adopt your baby. Nobody wants it. You might as well just go ahead and abort it. We need to cut down on Planned Parenthood. They think they're above the law, and we need to cut down on clinics who are just like Planned Parenthood, murdering babies and helping with human trafficking. When are we going to stop them?
Well, let me answer a few ways. First off, as governor in New Jersey, I ended Planned Parenthood funding in my first year as governor. I've viewed it 8 times since then, and Planned Parenthood does not get funded in New Jersey and hasn't for the last 6 years. Because what Hillary Clinton wants you to believe is that Planned Parenthood is an issue of women's health. It's a completely false narrative. They remember for a long time, until the president of Planned Parenthood had to go before Congress under oath, they were saying that, if Planned Parenthood clinics are closed, then women will have no place to go to get mammograms. Remember that whole argument? And then they get asked before Congress, is there any Planned Parenthood clinic in America that provides mammograms? And the answer is no. They just refer them to other places for mammograms. What we've done in New Jersey is we have really over 100 really good, very well qualified, federally qualified health clinics where men and women could both go and get treated for the full range of their health care needs, not just for one particular issue, but for a whole range of issues. And you need a president who's going to end funding for Planned Parenthood, because the president will veto it every time if it gets sent there now by our Congress. Now, I think Congress should send it to him and make him veto it so the American people know that he will veto it. And by the way, that's what we sent these Republicans to Congress to do, was to take a stand against the President of the United States. And, I heard Senator Rubio say a couple of weeks ago, well, I don't go back and vote in the Senate anymore because it doesn't matter what we send there. It doesn't matter until we get a new president. Well, it does matter. It matters because we as a party need to make a statement to the American people. Here's what we will do if you give us the presidency. And this way you won't have to wonder. They've done it. And if the president vetoes it, let him veto it. Let him stand behind what you just spoke about. See, when this first came out and Hillary Clinton attacked Republicans, I put out a video immediately and I said, Mrs. Clinton, I just want you to answer one question. Are you for funding an organization that systematically murders children in the womb in a way that maximizes the value of their body parts for sale on the open market? Because that's what's happening. And I want her to answer that question. And when I'm on the stage with her next September, you can be guaranteed that I'm going to ask her. And I can guarantee you something else. She won't answer. She'll say it's about women's health and all the rest. But you know what? Men and women in America will be watching that debate, and they'll know what happens when someone's willing to take a stand on something and someone's willing not to answer a question. So I think we will get this done. I can guarantee you we'll get done when I'm president, and you won't have to wonder whether I would or wouldn't, because I already have. That's the difference between being a governor and actually having a record of doing something. You're sitting in the United States Senate and you say, well, my votes don't matter because the president's not there. There's not a day as governor where what you say doesn't matter. I'd love to have a day where I just go, it doesn't matter what I think. It matters every day what I think and what I do and what I don't do. What bills I sign, which ones I veto. Which appointments I make, which ones I refuse to make. It matters. And you want somebody behind the desk in the Oval Office who you won't have to guess what they'll do. You'll be able to look at what they've done as governor and you'll know what they're going to do. And against the liberal Democratic legislature who has sent me funding for Planned Parenthood 8 times in 6 years, I've vetoed it 8 times, and the Republicans in my legislature have sustained those vetoes 8 times. And as long as I'm governor, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure Planned Parenthood isn't funded, and when I become president, I will do exactly the same thing.
But can we shut them down?
Well, listen, not if, unless one of two things. Either private contributions dry up, because let's face it, in this country, everybody's got the absolute right to contribute to whatever private charitable organizations they want to contribute to. The only way you do it is if they're violating the law. And they have to be regulated and monitored, and if they're violating the law, then you have the ability to. But remember this, I don't want a liberal Democratic president to come and say that they want to shut down crisis pregnancy centers because they're pro-abortion. And so I want to be very careful about how we do this, because I am opposed to Planned Parenthood. I don't support it. I don't think it should be supported with public money. But the only way you're going to close them down is if they're violating the law. And that's why how we deal with abortion in this country has to be dealt with very directly, and why I take the position I take by being pro-life. So we have to have that debate in this country. We have to have the debate. And right now, the law doesn't permit us to do it. But we have to continue to have that debate, and what we have to do is persuade hearts. We're going to persuade hearts in this country. And we have to turn more people towards our point of view. And that's part of the job of a president, too, is to use the bully pulpit to do that. And you can count on the fact that I will. I've done it in New Jersey, and I will do it as president as well. Yes, ma'am.
In today's world. I think 49% of the people do not pay zero federal taxes. You've got also the fact that Hillary has promised to erase student debt, close the coal mines and pay them not to work. I mean, she's promised everything to everybody, and everyone has their hand out. How can you compete against Santa?
Because I don't think that a majority of the American people still want that. They know how limiting it is. But we have not put on the other side, we've been apologetic about our positions. I'm not. See, what I believe is that the government shouldn't be determining the winners and losers in society. Some bureaucrats sit in some cubicle down in Washington, D.C. shouldn't decide who wins and who loses. Winning and losing in our economy should be determined by two things: the ingenuity of your ideas and the power of your own work ethic. See, my mother told me from the time I can remember, she said to me all the time, Christopher, if you work hard enough, you can do anything. Now, she was assuming certain things about our country that are starting to slip away, but they weren't slipping away back then. And I have worked really hard, and now I'm getting a chance to run for president. So, damn, she was right. You work hard enough, you can achieve anything you want in this country. And I still believe, I'm not one of these folks, this is where I disagreed with Mitt a few years ago. I don't believe that whatever number you want to use, 47, 49, whatever percent, I don't think that that's the majority of those people want to be in that circumstance. And I think if they had an opportunity to better their lives and you showed them a pathway to get there, that they would choose that over it. But we need to speak, once again, and the president never speaks about this, about the intrinsic value of work. Not just that it puts money in your pocket and food on your table, but there is something intrinsically valuable about getting up out of bed every day, getting a shower, getting some clothes on, and going someplace where you interact with other human beings and you provide your labor for something of value. You get to come home and tell your spouse or your children, hey, here's what happened at work today. Here's what I learned. Here's what annoyed me. Here's what made me happy. And they see you lead by that example every day. We don't talk about how valuable that is anymore. As a candidate for president, that's what I'm going to talk about. They say, look, Mrs. Clinton wants you to sit at home on the couch and just get things. I want you to get out of the house and live your life. Because once you start living life to the fullest, anything is possible. Anything is possible. You watch some of the success stories in this country that still happen every day. There's no other place in the world that could happen. Because we still have people who aspire to rewarding ingenuity and hard work. You saw this week that Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, and his wife had their first child, and that the letter they wrote to their daughter on the day she was born was that they're giving away 99% of their fortune to try to make the world a better place. 99% of $45 billion. Now let's remember something. This kid started in his dorm room at Harvard with an idea. And he worked like crazy and built one of the most successful companies the world's ever seen from nothing, from an idea in a dorm room with 3 of his friends. And now think about the infinite possibilities of all the lives that's going to affect, because he and his wife have decided to give away 99% of that money to try to support causes that they believe will improve education, improve public health. Not giveaways to people, but education so that you can make more of yourself. Public health so you can live a healthy life and do something with your life. I thought it was inspiring. And no place else in the world does that happen. Nowhere else. He's 31 years old. And at 31 years old, he's decided that all this money is better off being spent on things to make America a greater place than it is being spent on his own personal vanity. Those are the things we need to talk about again in this country, because that will inspire people to want to be like him. Even if they can't get to 45 billion, they could get to something, and they're going to improve their own lives and they're going to improve their country. So I'm not pessimistic. I'm optimistic about the spirit of this country. I don't think government has yet squeezed out of us every bit of ambition and work ethic and ingenuity. They're trying, but that's why I'm running for president, so that they don't. Because I believe, in my heart, I really believe, or I couldn't be here, that a president can make a difference in that. And this president's made a difference in the wrong direction. We need to turn it around. And the good news is, we elect the right person, we can. And I believe that. Yes, sir.
A good deal of time focusing on Homeland Security, and you're obviously very concerned about that. We all subscribe to that. But once you break out of the top three, if you become president of the United States, what are the 2 or 3 primary issues on which you will have to focus? Sure. You hit on one. What are the other 2?
First is going to be entitlement reform. And here's why. I'm the only person with an entitlement reform plan. I mentioned that off the top. But here's why I have one. 71% of all federal spending today, 71% of all federal spending today is on entitlements and debt service. Just to give you some perspective, when John Kennedy was elected president 55 years ago, it was 26%. We've gone from spending 25 cents of every dollar on entitlements and debt service to 71 cents of every dollar on entitlements and debt service. We're spending 71 cents of every dollar on yesterday rather than on tomorrow. That's a problem for 2 reasons. One, because it's not going to allow us to continue to be the cutting edge country that we need to be in developing technologies and all the rest, because we're not investing in them. And secondly, despite all that spending, those programs are going bankrupt. And Harvard and Dartmouth put out a study 5 months ago that says that Social Security will be insolvent in 7 to 8 years. So we have to do this not only to change what we're investing in, we need to do this because we're going to go broke otherwise, and Social Security is going to die on the vine. So entitlement reform is really important. And I've got a 12-point plan on it. Be relieved, I'm not going through it right now. You can go on chrischristie.com and see the 12-point plan. It's been scored by the Congressional Budget Office. It'll save over $1 trillion in the next 10 years, and we'll solidify those programs for 30 years. And that's what we need to do. Because for those folks who really need Social Security and are depending upon it in their retirement, it needs to be there for them. It's a deal we made with them, despite the fact that the government lied to those folks and stole from them, because there's no money in the trust account. You remember in 2000, Al Gore talked about the lockbox, right? And right now you're saying to yourself, do I remember Al Gore saying that? Or do I remember the guy on Saturday Night Live pretending to be Al Gore saying lockbox? Doesn't matter, same thing, right? He, they stole from us. The money's not there. In the lockbox is a stack of IOUs. So we need to attend to that and attend to it quickly. Secondly, we have to change the tax system in this country. Most people in America believe the tax system is rigged for the rich. And the reason they do is because it is. It's rigged for the rich. And we need to make the tax code very simple. I would reduce and get rid of all of the deductions except for 2. Home mortgage interest deduction and charitable contribution deduction. That's what real people use to help them buy a home and to support the charitable causes that they believe are best to help those in need in their community. Everything else has got to go. And if we do, we can lower our rates all the way down to 8% at the low end and 28% at the high end, which is where they were when Ronald Reagan did tax reform in the mid-1980s, and we entered the greatest period of economic growth in this country's history. We need to do it because we're growing at like 1.5% right now. And that's why my son is a senior in college right now, and he's sending out resumes, and for every 10 he's sending out, he's getting maybe 1 call for every 10. Jobs aren't increasing in this country because our growth is so anemic. And it's because the government takes most of our money. And we don't want them deciding how to spend our money. We'd prefer to. So in addition to the terror activity, the other 2 things that I deal with right away are entitlement reform, so we get our budget moving towards balance and save those programs, and a tax reform so that we can stop rigging the system for the rich and we can have real growth. If we got to 3.5%, 4% growth in this country, our deficit would disappear, and we'd have more people happy and at work. In relation to this lady's question, a lot of those people, by the way, aren't going to work because there aren't jobs there for them to get. Some of them don't want them, but some of them can't get them. We need to get people back to work who want to work, and then we'll start nudging the ones who don't want to work after that. Sir.
One of Reagan's biggest legacies was his Supreme Court appointments. And since Borthville, it seems like a lot of them don't have a paper trail. Now the next, I believe, there's 3 judges that could be off the court during the president's next term. And what would you look for as you, with your law background, of an appointment to the court?
I will tell you exactly the type of person I will appoint, and it's a guy who's on the court right now. Look at Sam Alito on the court right now, and that's exactly the kind of person I'll appoint. Sam Alito has a big track record, was a long-time judge on the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, and he is right now the most reliable conservative on that court. And he had a long track record, but he's not inflammatory. But every time you go and look at Justice Alito's record, this is a guy who's there on the right side of the issues every time. So if you're looking for the kind of justices I would appoint, I'd go to Sam Alito and say, hey, Sam, tell me about a few good Circuit Court of Appeals or District Court judges that you think have the same kind of approach you have, and let me sit down and talk with them. I want people with a track record, and I'm willing to have to fight about it, because without a track record, you don't know what they're going to do, and it's a lifetime appointment. And where presidents mess up more than anything else is on the Supreme Court. You go all the way back to Eisenhower putting Earl Warren and Bill Brennan on the court. He said it was his two biggest mistakes as president. You go through to David Souter and a whole list of them that we could go through. People who we thought, the presidents legitimately thought were going to be one way and turned out to be the other. The problem always in those circumstances where they were not people with long track records. We need people with long track records, which means we're going to have more of a fight at confirmation, but let's have the fight then, rather than be wringing our hands and being angry about who we appointed later because they didn't turn out to be what we thought they would be. So that's the way I would go about it. Yes, sir.
I'm Jonas in your foreign policy. How would you deal with the relationship to Europe regarding to topics like ISIS or economy topics like TTIP?
Well, a few things. On our relationship with Europe in general, the president has neglected that relationship. And you could see folks in the EU and in those individual nations that have long time been our allies don't know that they can count on the president to keep his word on things. He's had disputes with Chancellor Merkel. He's had disputes with the French president. He's had disputes with Prime Minister Cameron. And so the first thing that I would do as president in the first 100 days is to invite all of those leaders over individually to meet with me at Camp David and say to them, first vent. Tell me what you're upset about. Tell me what you're angry about. Tell me what you think went really wrong in the last 8 years. Let them get it out off their chest. And say, okay, now what do we do to make the country and our relationships better? What's your vision? Because this has to be an alliance. It's about working together. It's not about us dictating to them everything that's going to happen. Because we're going to want them to be in on things that we want them to do as well. And you need them to buy in politically. They've got constituencies to answer to. And they need to believe that it's in the best interests of Germany, the best interests of Great Britain, the best interests of France, and all the other NATO countries. So I would say on ISIS, I think Europeans now acutely understand, maybe even better than Americans, the danger. You're going to have to look at travel within the EU and whether this visa waiver program is something that needs to be re-examined. Because it's become very dangerous and very difficult to track. And I think we're going to find that Paris was an intelligence failure. You know, these guys just didn't get together 15 minutes before the attack at the Taco Bell, to decide what they were going to do. They were planning for a while. They lived in multiple countries. And this was an intelligence failure by the French and by us for not being able to find this stuff out and intervene beforehand. So I think on ISIS, we're going to have to get together and say, these folks mean to not just do us harm, they mean to eliminate us from the face of the earth. And so if you believe that is truly the threat, and that's what we're going to have to determine, do our European allies believe that's truly the threat? If they do, then I suspect there's very little they wouldn't be willing to do to avoid that eventuality. But we got to work together to come to the conclusion of what needs to be done. And we need to do as much listening as we're doing talking in that regard. Because we're going to ask them to put their citizens' lives on the line as well. And if you're going to do that, they have to buy in. And the only way that's going to happen is if you listen. And I think on trade, listen, I think that America should be, open on trade as long as it's fair. I think that we all can compete with each other in a way that's open and fair and that helps to create jobs in all societies. And there's no reason for us not to be working with each other to get those things done. What we got to be smart about is neither side, and this is now predominantly our country and your country in the European relationship, We can't be looking to take advantage of each other. The two most powerful economies in the world, from Europe and North America, need to be working together. And we can help each other. And that's the way we have to look at it. And this is not a zero-sum game. We can grow the economies even more and make the pies even bigger. It's not a finite pie. That's kind of going back to this lady's question. I don't believe there's just so much pie to go around. Work ethic and ingenuity grows that pie, but you got to work together to do it. So that would be my approach. It would be a very cooperative approach with Europe, because I believe in a world that's as dangerous as this, America cannot afford to go it alone. We've got to do it with our friends. But you need a president who those friends can look in the eye and say, you mean it? You're going to do it no matter what the polls say next week? You know, and I look forward to sitting down with Prime Minister Cameron and President Hollande and Chancellor Merkel to say, okay, what are we going to do? These are the nations that helped to rebuild the world after World War II. What are we going to do to now make sure the world stays safe for the world we rebuilt? And that's the way I would approach it. Yes, ma'am.
What you would do about sanctuary cities, because Kate's law just went nowhere. And I think that's really important.
Sanctuary city Christie administration, because in a Christie administration, we'd actually enforce the law. I'm a former prosecutor. This isn't hard, right? The laws get passed. It's our job to enforce them, not just the ones we like. I remember the oath I took for governor of New Jersey. One of the things you say in the oath for governor of New Jersey is you swear to enforce the laws and uphold the Constitution of the state of New Jersey. You don't say, I'll enforce the laws that I like. There are laws in New Jersey that I don't like, a lot. But once I become governor, I have two options: change it or enforce it. And so with sanctuary cities, this president has festered a lawless feeling in our country, that if you don't like the law, you don't have to follow it. So you don't agree with the immigration law? Don't enforce it in your city. You think marijuana should be able to be smoked recreationally? Go ahead. There's federal law against it. Don't worry about it. I don't like that federal law, so you don't have to worry. You don't have to pay attention to it. The problem with that is that maybe today they're not enforcing laws that you disagree with, but what happens when they start not enforcing laws you agree with? We've got to use the system we have, and you need a president who understands that your job is not to pick and choose. That's done by the Congress. They decide which laws to pass, and the president signs or doesn't. But once those laws are in effect, the job of the head of the executive branch, the President of the United States, is to enforce the law. So any sanctuary cities in the United States, when I become president, there will be no more funding from the federal government for cities that don't enforce the federal law. That'll be the way it'll work.
What is your the military strategy for Iraq and Syria?
Well, presidents left the next guy a real great hand to play here. Iraq was in pretty good shape until the president pulled all of our troops out. And you can agree or disagree with going into Iraq in the first place. And I think most Americans disagree now, knowing what we know today. If we knew there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, would we have gone in? I wouldn't have. And I don't know that President Bush would have either, if he knew there were no weapons of mass destruction. He acted on bad intelligence. That's a tragedy. And we're going to work as hard as we can to make sure that never happens again. But once we were there, and we spent all the blood and treasure that we spent to pick up and walk out for a political soundbite, so the President of the United States could say, I got everyone out of Iraq, and now Iraq is on fire. And that fire, you know what it created? ISIS. And so we have to arm the Kurds, give the Kurds the opportunity to defend their part of that country. Kurds have been extremely loyal to the United States. We'll have to work closely with our friends in Turkey to make sure that no one's playing outside the lines, but I think we need to help the Kurds. Second, I think we need to set up a no-fly zone in Syria and a safe zone in Syria so that citizens, refugees in Syria stay in Syria. They're running because they're afraid for their life. Let's protect their lives there rather than having to send them all over Europe, the Middle East, and the United States. The really tough part of this, I got asked this last night here in Iowa about, do you get rid of Assad or not? I think you have to. But I recognize that you don't know what's coming next, because the president has so forsaken the rebels and allowing now the Russians to bomb those rebels with impunity that we don't know really what we'll wind up with afterwards. But we know what we've got. A murderous butcher who's killed 230,000 of his own people with chemical weapons and regular weapons, and that's created an enormous crisis. I don't know. And ISIS, by the way, part of their creation is in Iraq. Part of it is because Syria has been so messed up, and those folks are angry at Assad. So I think we set up a no-fly zone and a safe zone in Syria, and we look to move Assad out. I think that's what we have to do. But we got to do it with our NATO allies. We have to do it with our Sunni Arab allies. Because if we're an occupying force again in the Middle East, that's a losing proposition for America. We need to do it with everybody together, so there is the force of the world saying in Iraq and Syria that we have to get rid of ISIS. Because ISIS is now the single biggest terrorist threat that we face. And so that's where the way I would go about it. Yes, sir.
Your views on climate change were sort of the most nuanced on stage, I thought. I wondered if you could address that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't... Complicated, right? There is... Climate change happens. The climate changes all the time. It always has. And I think it's ridiculous to say that the activity of human beings don't contribute to it. They do. Stuff that we do contributes to the change in the climate. The question is, does that create a crisis? I don't believe it does. I have not seen evidence that the climate is changing so drastically that we have to take the kind of drastic measures that the president is talking about. And so I think it's stupid for us, and I think it hurts us politically to deny that the climate changes. It does, but it always has. That's not something new. The climate's always changed. And I think it's also silly for us not to admit that our activity contributes to that. But does that mean there's a crisis where we have to impose a huge tax on the American people and tie our hands behind our back from an energy perspective so that we can have even a harder time competing with the rest of the world? I don't think so. And I will tell you what I did in New Jersey. In the Northeast, they have something called the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which is essentially, before I became governor, all the northeastern states got together and did a cap and trade program. When I became governor, I said, this is ridiculous. It's making us less competitive. It's just adding to everybody's electric bill. So I pulled out of it. And the only northeastern state to have pulled out of it. What's happened as a result? We've already met our clean air goals for 2020, already by 2014, without some regional cap and trade thing. Why? Because we've worked with the private sector to be smart. We're building more natural gas plants, 3 more in our state, which is a lower carbon footprint than a coal plant. 53% of our electricity in New Jersey is generated by nuclear. By nuclear, in the most densely populated state in America, nuclear has been operating safely for 40 years. We regulate it closely, and it's worked safely. And 53% of our electricity comes from something that doesn't add to polluting the environment. And here's the one you're going to win a bet on tonight. So if you're going to a sports bar tonight to watch the Iowa game, I'm going to make sure you drink for free. Get next to somebody and say, let me ask you a question. Who are the top 3 solar energy producing states in America? They'll get the first 2. That's not where you're going to win your money. Arizona and California are number 1 and number 2. Number 3 is the great state of New Jersey. You'll drink all night. By the time they get to New Jersey as a solar energy producer, but here's how we did it. We worked with the private sector to make it affordable. And we made certainty in terms of being able to sell power back to the grid and all the rest of it. People knew what their costs were going to be and what they could get back from it. So now we're the 3rd largest solar producing state in the country. All those things contributed without any new taxes to us being able to meet our clean air goals for 2020. We don't need to do crazy stuff, but we also don't need to be people who say we deny that the climate is changing. Of course it's changing. So let's not be dumb about that. It's changing, but it's not changing to a level of crisis. It's always changed. And of course our activity on Earth contributes to it. Of course it does. But that doesn't mean we're bad guys. See, that's the difference between me and the president. The president wants you all to like turn off your lights, turn off your air conditioning, turn off your heat, turn off your TV, don't watch the game tonight, contribute to stopping global warming by not watching the Iowa game tonight. You know, I mean, silliness. And how about this? In a week that we've had the president spending his time in Europe to talk about climate change. I guarantee you one thing. The families of those dead folks in Paris, they're not worried about climate change anymore. Not worried about climate change. And this president should be more focused on protecting the lives and the safety of the American people. Because let me tell you, this climate change thing is clearly the play for that second Nobel Peace Prize. And that's what it's all about. He wants to get one that he might actually have an excuse for, as opposed to the first one, because he just gave a good speech at the UN. So that's what I feel about it. And there will be some on that stage who will deny that climate change even exists. I think that puts us out of step with science, but it also puts us behind the 8 ball politically, too. Now, let me get it make sense. Yes, ma'am.
Constitution.
Yes, I love the 10th Amendment.
Yes, there's a lot, a lot of power back to the states. And specifically, I'm looking at education in terms of what should be the power of the federal government regarding the Common Core and what states should have power to do. So,
yeah, we tried Common Core in New Jersey. It doesn't work. And here's why it doesn't work. Teachers hate it, parents hate it, and students hate it. When you're trying to do something in the classroom and you're 0 for 3 on teachers, parents, and students, time to try something else. So we've eliminated Common Core in New Jersey. And here's what I think. I think the federal government has a role in helping to fund education across the country, but it should go as block grants. And it should go to the local school boards through the states and let them decide how to spend the money. Here's why. Not only because of the 10th Amendment philosophical concerns, because I've looked through the Constitution, I don't see education anywhere in there as a power of the federal government. By the way, nor do I see health care either, but I'm sure we'll get to that at some point. But also because I want you to decide what your children are learning. I'm very concerned about having people hundreds, if not thousands of miles away deciding what your children are learning. If your children are being taught stuff in the classroom that you believe is wrong, that isn't consistent with your values, the longest drive you should have to make is from your home to the school board meeting. To stand up for what you believe your children should be taught or not taught in the classroom. You shouldn't have to get on an airplane and fly to Washington, D.C. to meet with some bureaucrat in the Department of Education who's going to listen to you anyway. But your local school board member, they'll listen to you or they're going to get fired by the voters. And so I think that having educational decisions made at the local level is the best way to go, not only to be consistent constitutionally, but to be smart from an educational perspective. The single most important people in public education are parents. If the parents work with their kids at home on their homework, they do better. If they show that they care about their grades, kids work harder. If you're an absentee parent, it's a problem. And so I want this to be not only a power of the parents, but a responsibility of the parents. Hold your teachers accountable. Hold your principals accountable. Hold your school board members accountable. Because these are our kids, and there's nothing more precious to us than our children and their future, so we need to spend some time on it. And the more we send this authority and money back to the locality, the less excuse parents are going to have for not being involved. So that's the way I would go about it. Although I will tell you this, Mary Pat and I split up the homework duties. I do like the social studies English stuff. She does math and science. And one night she was out with a group of friends at book club. And our son Patrick, who was 13 at the time, was just beginning algebra. And he came to me and he's like, Dad, I'm having trouble with this algebra problem. So I sat down with him, I looked at it, and I said, Patrick, I want to make you understand something. You need to call Mom. And he said, Dad, but you're smart. And I said, listen, I want you to understand how unsmart I am on this. I said, if a guy came in the door right now, put a gun to my head, and said, Chris, do that algebra problem or I'll blow your brains out, I'd say to them, pull the trigger and put me out of my misery, because there's no hope I'm going to be able to do it. So both parents need to be involved, because often each parent has their own particular expertise. And if my poor kids were counting on me for math, it would be a sad day for them in the algebra classroom. Yes.
How would you get us back on track?
Well, you have Obamacare, and here's why. It's not just because it's Obamacare, although that would be a pretty good reason. It's more because I don't believe that we should have a healthcare system that's run from Washington, D.C. See, here would be my solution to the healthcare issue. I would repeal Obamacare and say that within 1 year, each state must come up with a plan of their own on how they're going to deal with health care for their citizens. So that Iowa, the governor, and the legislature here, you decide how you want to do it. Is it a system of exchanges? Is it a system of health savings accounts? Is it a system that's an amalgam of a whole group of them? How do you regulate insurance? What do you demand from employers? What do people have to put in? Because each state is so different. I mean, think about the idea that you're going to have a state like Iowa and a state like New Jersey, and that you have the same set of healthcare rules to deal with the challenges. You know, lots of what I hear from Iowans about the challenges they have in healthcare regard distance. How can I get to a doctor with the expertise that I need to deal with my particular problem? It's a long way away, and my access problems are that. In New Jersey, we're the most densely populated state in the country. You know, we trip over a hospital every 4 miles. They're everywhere, right? That's not the problem. For us, it's all cost, because it's such an expensive place to live to begin with. And so put the obligation on the governors and the legislatures. Come up with a plan. I like that for 2 reasons. First, 10th Amendment, because healthcare is not in there. Second is because you have the opportunity, like with the school board, to have a much greater effect on your governor and your state legislature than you do on Washington, D.C. And so I think that would allow for a really robust debate in every state in the country for the next year over what your healthcare system should look like in Iowa. And you've got a great governor and a great legislature. They'll go ahead and they'll bat it around, and they'll come up with the ideas, and then you'll get to pass on those ideas. But I think that's the way to put us back on the right track. Let each state make these determinations. The founders had a wisdom in empowering the states, because it's the government closest to the people. And I don't think that the federal government can come up with one plan that deals with Iowa, New Jersey, Wyoming, Montana, and Mississippi in the same way. We didn't become just one country. We kept our distinction of 50 states, and we did it for a reason, because there are differences. Come to New Jersey, I'll show you the differences. Lots of differences. So now they're telling me I can take one more question, which means I will take 2. See, the reason for this is pretty simple. One, I want to show them I'm still the boss. You laugh, but let me tell you what it's like to run for president. I assume no one else in this room has run for president other than me? All right, well, let me explain to you what it's like to run for president. What it's like to run for president is that you are surrounded each and every day by people that are younger than you that tell you where to go and what to do every minute. This is the only time, standing in the center of this room, where I get to make the decisions. I know I'm going someplace next. I think I'm going to Iowa Falls, right? Yes, okay. I didn't pick going to Iowa Falls. Someone else did. I'm doing a town hall meeting like this in Iowa Falls as soon as I leave here. I will only be able to assert myself when I'm standing by the stool with my 2 bottles of water. Otherwise, they tell me what I have to do. So they want 1, I'm taking 2. Sir.
How would you address what seems to be a deteriorating situation in our country today?
See, I think that justice has to be more than a word. It has to be a way of life. And I think that a lot of the anger that's going on in many of our cities is based upon the idea that they think that justice is not applied evenly and fairly. They see a president who picks and chooses the laws he wants to enforce or doesn't. He sees the reaction that comes from police officers to that. They're frustrated, they're angry, they're scared. The FBI director recently said there's a chill wind blowing through law enforcement in America. And that's because the politicians aren't supporting law enforcement. I think you have to go from city to city in this country and say to folks, listen, there's a whole new set of rules coming in. And you know what they are? The new rules are the old rules. The law will be applied evenly and fairly to everyone, regardless of the color of your skin, regardless of how much money you make, regardless of your ethnicity. The law is going to be applied evenly and fairly and swiftly. And we're going to appoint an attorney general who's going to give the country confidence once again that he or she's not going to pick how to, enforce the law based upon which ones they like, but just because they're on the books and it's your job, your sworn job to do it. I think we also need to take a new approach on policing. You know, we've done this in the city of Camden. Now, Camden, New Jersey, when I became governor, was considered the most dangerous city in America. And more murders, per square mile than any city in the country. What we did was I went to the mayor of Camden, who's an African-American Democrat woman. And I said to her, Dana, if you're willing to do this, I'll do it with you. The police department was a mess. They had an awfully bloated, ridiculous contract. They were getting like their birthdays off as paid holidays. They were getting paid differential for the day shift. When are you supposed to work? If it's not the day shift, right? Paid differential for the day shift. Lots of them working desk jobs and not out on the street. And crime was running rampant. And they were represented by a union that refused to negotiate anything differently. I said to her, how about we do this? You and I together, we fire the entire police department. And we set up a county police department with a metro division that covers the city of Camden. We need to get the county government to come in on it, but I think they will. I'll pay for the cost of firing these folks. And we're going to hire a whole new police department with new rules and new salaries. And from a police department that had 240 police officers, we have the exact same budget now with 400 police officers. And they were schooled in community policing, which means that you're a member of the community, not just a bystander. Those folks are now on foot and on bicycles as much as they're in cars. Almost exclusively behind the desks in those jobs are civilians, not police officers. And those officers participate in sports with the kids in the neighborhoods. They go from door to door and meet people. During this time of the season, a number of them will dress up as Santa Claus, drop off gifts in that are donated to some of the more depressed parts of the city. What's happened is the local folks have bought in. They don't think that law enforcement is the enemy anymore. They think that they're part of the community. And what have we seen happen in 3 years? Over a 60% decline in murders in Camden. Because the folks are working with the police and the police are working with the folks. We need to have that approach all over the country. We need to understand that public safety is all our responsibility. And they need to have a president who will talk to them about that and do it with credibility because he's done it. Because it's not theoretical. Because I fired the entire police department in Camden, New Jersey. They sued us and we won. And I stood up to the protests and all the rest of it. Because what I cared, and when I went to Camden, I got great support from a town that's 85% registered Democrat, majority minority. And I got great support from those folks because I went to them and said, I'm doing this for you. I want your kids to be able to walk to school in safety. I want you to be able to go to the market and not fear for your life. I want you to sit on the stoop on a summer evening and talk to your neighbors. It didn't happen that way in Camden before. All of those things will help to lower racial tensions in this country. And if people think they're getting a fair deal, if they think the law is being enforced fairly, honestly, and with the hopes and aspirations of the community at heart, the violence will decrease and the tension will decrease. But if you're the President of the United States stands up every time there's a conflict and takes the side against the police officers, which this president does over and over and over, police officers then feel put upon, that affects their attitude, and the public begins to believe the President of the United States, that somehow the police are out to get them. There are always going to be bad cops, the same way there are bad lawyers and bad doctors and bad accountants. And it doesn't mean that we think the entire legal profession, well, maybe we do think the entire legal profession is bad. I don't know. I'm a recovering lawyer, so I don't know, but we don't believe the entire legal profession or medical profession or accounting profession is bad because we have a corrupt accountant or an incompetent doctor or a crooked lawyer. We deal with the crooked lawyer, the incompetent accountant, and the bad doctor. But we don't throw away the whole profession. That's what we're doing in law enforcement. It's bad. That's what I would do. Yes, ma'am.
My first name is Christie.
Excellent.
To another Christie.
Excellent.
Welcome to Mason City.
Happy
Thank
to
you
be
so
here.
much. And first I want to say thank you for the MSN debate. It was just ridiculous. I'm sure we all watched, and how you called out the moderators and said, you know what you're doing is even called rude in my state.
Yeah. Let me guarantee you, Christie, that's a high bar in New Jersey, man. A high bar.
I almost wish y'all would have just walked off the stage and said, this is ridiculous.
Free TV time, we're never walking off stage.
One of my favorite quotes of the night, and we appreciate your strong stance on many things, and obviously our White House right now is just pretty much a joke. My question actually has to do with the social issue. I believe right now our hot button issue is obviously terrorism. It's so hot button right now. If it wouldn't be that, I would say our other issue would be religious
freedom and political correctness in America. It's ridiculous. Whether you are a cake baker or a floral business and you do not want to cater to a homosexual wedding, and the pressure is to shut you down or close you down, we should have the freedom here in America. And even in San Bernardino, the lady next door to the terrorist, she did not want to mention anything to the law enforcement because she was too nervous of being racial profiling, to be too politically correct. So as president, how would you handle political correctness and the foundation of Christianity that we have in America?
Let's do this first. I'm from New Jersey. I don't think anybody would accuse me of being politically correct ever, nor have they. I'm the guy who, told people to get the hell off the beach and told someone in a rally to sit down and shut up. I mean, I'm going to say what I really believe. But I'm going to do so in a way that has some experience and information behind it. But on religious freedom, listen, this is really important. Again, this is the First Amendment. The First Amendment not only promises freedom of religion, but also prohibits the government from establishing a religion. Two sides of that coin, really important. And so everyone has to have the right, like when we had the situation in West Virginia with the clerk, to me this was a pretty easy decision to solve, right? You say to yourself, okay, she's running the clerk's office, she's an elected person, this offends her religious beliefs, but the law in West Virginia says that there has to be licenses provided for same-sex marriages. So have someone else do it. There's a whole bunch of other people in that office. Find someone in that office whose religious beliefs it doesn't offend and have them issue the license. But don't force this woman, put her in jail because she's following her religious beliefs. Put it on her and say, hey, by the way, find someone else in your office, there's got to be someone, who is willing to issue these licenses because that's what the law requires. But the initial knee-jerk reaction of liberals in this country is put her in jail and make her do what we say she's going to do. Well, that violates religious freedom. And I've said all along, like, listen, if you have a job in the government, it becomes harder, but the job's got to get done if the law requires it, but it doesn't mean she had to do it. And I think that as we go through all the different, we could go through 8 or 10 different examples, right? But in the end, the core belief has to be that we don't want to discriminate against people in this country. Really don't. Well, the fact is that I oppose same-sex marriage. I vetoed same-sex marriage in New Jersey. Our Supreme Court overruled me before the U.S. Supreme Court did what they did. And so we had same-sex marriage for 6 or 8 months before the U.S. Supreme Court made their decision. I believe marriage is between one man and one woman. And, I think that's what it should be. But you know what? Now that, for whether we like it or not, that issue is settled for the time being by the Supreme Court. Now if there's a constitutional amendment or something else that gets changed, that's something that the whole country is going to have to decide. But right now, this is a settled issue. So when you're in government, you can't discriminate against people, but you also have to respect the rights of others to pursue their religious beliefs in the way that they see fit. That's the First Amendment to the Constitution, the freedom to practice your religion. And so we have to find that balance. And we have to have that conversation out loud. We can't sit here and say to ourselves that it's a conversation that we shouldn't have. We have to have it. And my view has always been that when you have to err on one side or the other, you err on the side that the Constitution tells you to, which is, freedom of religion, as long as it's done in a way that does not violate the rights of others or their safety, has to be safeguarded. And we'd want to do that, I would think, in our country, right? Wouldn't we want to encourage people to have greater belief in God, a deeper belief in God in the way they see fit? Not that they should have to, but if they have that, wouldn't we want to encourage it and make it flourish and bring it out more? A society that believes in a higher power is generally, I think, a more peaceful and stable society because they realize there's something bigger than what's happening today. That we have a finite amount of time on earth, but an eternity in heaven, if we make it. Right? So, I would think a more religious society, with each person pursuing their faith as they see fit, is the kind of thing that we should aspire to. And that a president should do that by making sure that the laws are enforced in a way that's fair and respectful of all that, and that he or she should be free, if they want to talk about their faith, so that people in the country know where their president is on these issues. I'm I'm a Catholic, and I believe in the Catholic faith, and all our children go to Catholic school. You'll know who runs my house, right? Because I went to public school, K to 12. Mary Pat went to Catholic school, K to 12. So we have 4 kids, and they all go to Catholic school. But it was the right decision. It was a good decision because our children every day were having the values that we were trying to ingrain in them in our home reinforced, not undercut, in their school experience every day. So we could afford to do it, and so I'm glad we did. But I need to be talking about those things too, because you need to know, where am I coming from on that, so that you have a greater sense of where I will come down on decisions like the one that you're talking about. So I think we have to have an open discussion about this because something's been foisted upon the country that lots of people in the country don't agree with. So we better have an open and honest discussion about it so that we make sure that we handle it the right way. And that's the way I would handle it. But thank you for your question very much. So I want to say thank you. 2 things before we go. First, thank you. Thanks for coming. Thanks for spending the time. I really appreciate it. Secondly, I want to say one last thing to you all. We talked about all these different ideas, proposals, approaches to things, all the rest of it. And that's all really important. And you go to our website at chrischristie.com. And can you believe, when I ran for president, someone else owned chrischristie.com? And it wasn't like just some guy who thought he might run for president, so I bought it to invest in it. There's another guy named Chris Christie. What other set of parents other than mine decided to visit that cruelty upon their child, right? I remember saying to my mother, and this is a true story. I remember saying to my mother, Chris Christie, how did you guys come up with that? And my mother looked at me, she said, it was a mistake. I'm like, thanks. But what you need to know is back what we talked about at the top. It's not only the set of proposals and the record and all the rest of it. When you're trying to decide who you're going to vote for, you need to know what's going on in here as well. You need to get to know the person. Because all the different questions you asked me today, I know there are going to be things that happen to me as president that we could have never anticipated. I guarantee you that when George W. Bush came here in 1999 and 2000 as governor of Texas, and he did town hall meetings like this, that nobody asked him, Governor, what would you do if hijackers hijacked 4 planes, flew 2 of them into the World Trade Center, 1 into the Pentagon, and 1 going towards the Capitol but got crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania? What would you do? No one could have ever anticipated that, ever. But what we knew, because we knew George W. Bush, was that he would have the strength of character to lead our nation through that really difficult time. Maybe not perfectly every day, but with a strength of character and a sense of purpose. And that doesn't come from some set of proposals he put on his website. That comes from in here. When he stood up at the World Trade Center and said, I can hear you, and the folks who did this to us will hear from us soon. That wasn't something a speechwriter wrote for him. That was something that came from his heart. So I'm going to end by telling you who I am, so you know. I come from an Irish father and a Sicilian mother. Yeah, you're laughing. You must understand. You see, what that means is, in practical matters, as the oldest son in that family, it means I became expert at dispute resolution at a very young age. This was an emotional household, and one where feelings were put out there very easily. And, my dad is still alive. He's 82 years old. Wonderful guy. We live stream these things. He's watching now, I guarantee you, through that camera there, the Jersey Shore. Hello, Dad. Good to see you. He is threatening to come to Iowa to campaign. Beware. Because when he comes, he's one of these guys who'll come in, he'll be hugging you, he'll be telling you stories, embarrassing stories about me when I'm a kid, and he'll stay here longer than anybody will want him to stay and talk to you. He's that kind of gregarious, really outgoing guy. But I've told him over and over again, despite what a great guy is, that in the automobile of life, he was merely a passenger. Mom was the driver. Mom set all the rules. Mom was judge, jury, and executioner, and she liked the last role the best. And she set all the rules. And the biggest rule we had in our house, she had lots of them, but the biggest rule she had in our house was, there is no suffering in silence. Now, I suspect that she set this rule to use it herself, right? Because she used it more than anybody else. But she'd say to us, if you suffer in silence, don't complain to me later on. Come to me, I can help. Or not, but don't suffer in silence. And, when I got to be older, I got to be a teenager, and I could push back on it. I'd be like, Mom, enough. I hear you. Enough already. She'd go, no, Christopher, you're going to hear it now. I got to get it off my chest. There'll be no deathbed confessions in this family. You're going to hear it right now. And that's the way she taught us to be. So I said I had a Sicilian mother because 11 years ago, my mom was diagnosed with lung cancer. She was a lifetime smoker. She started smoking when she was 16 years old in 1948. And she smoked her whole life. And she tried like heck to quit. She tried everything. And you see the gum and the patches, hypnosis. That was really a fun time when mom was being hypnotized because it did nothing for the smoking, but it mellowed her out a little bit. So it's actually, for us, it was actually a relatively happy time. She tried everything. She couldn't quit. And finally, on Valentine's Day of 2004, she was diagnosed with lung cancer. And for any of you who've gone through this, you know that that can either be a very long disease or it could be very quick. Unfortunately, in my mom's case, it was very quick. So I was U.S. attorney at the time. By the end of April, she got diagnosed on Valentine's Day. By the end of April, I was in San Diego for the U.S. Attorney's National Conference. And my younger brother called me and he said, listen, mom's taking a real turn for the worse. They put her back in the hospital. And the doctor said, if you want to see her, you need to come home now. So it's okay. So I got on the red-eye flight that night. I flew home from San Diego to New Jersey, got in the car, went to the hospital. And when I got there, they had started to give her morphine. And you know, if you've gone through this, that that's like really the beginning of the end. And so she's kind of in and out of sleeping. So I sat there for a little while, and she woke up. It's typical of my mother, right? I mean, she hadn't seen me for a week. And she certainly wasn't expecting me. So she looked up and she said, not hello or good morning or how was your trip or anything. She goes, what day is it? I said, it's Friday, Mom. Good morning. Good to see you. She goes, good. What time is it? And I said, it's 9:30 in the morning. And she said, go to work. I said to her, Mom, I just flew across the entire country to come and visit you. I've decided to take the day off from work and spend the day with you. And she said to me, Christopher, it is a work day. Go to work. I'm like, Mom, what are you afraid of not getting your taxpayers' money's worth? Like, I'll make up the time. Don't worry about it. I want to stay here with you today. And she reached over and she grabbed my hand and she said, Christopher, go to work. It's where you belong. There's nothing left unsaid between us. Other than the birth of our 4 children, it was the single most powerful moment of my life because my mother was giving me permission to let her go. And, you know, as I sat there, I thought to myself, this is what she's been teaching me my whole life. She was right. There were no deathbed confessions because there didn't need to be. Every grievance had been aired. Every joy had been shared. She knew that I loved her, and I knew that she loved me. And there was nothing left to say. So I thought to myself, damn, she's right again. And I just got up and I said, okay, Mom, I'll go to work. And I kissed her on the forehead, and she looked at me and she said, good boy. And I walked out, and that was the last word she ever said to me. 3 hours later, she went into a coma, and 3 days later, she died. And I have to tell you that I have not one regret, not one, because I've lived my life the way she taught me to live my life. And the reason I'm telling you that story is to let you know that that's exactly who I am. And so I know that if my mom were still alive to see the circus that my life has become, she'd have lots to say. But I know there's 2 things she'd say for sure. First, she'd say, so, you're running for president of the United States, Mr. Big Shot. She'll say, I changed your diaper. I know who you are. Don't act big with me, buddy. My mother will want me to keep my feet on the ground and my head on my shoulders during all this. The second thing I know she'd say to me is, look, if you're going to do this, if you're going to ask them to give you the most trust that they give to anyone outside their family, then you need to tell them everything, Chris. You need to tell them what you think and how you feel. Because in a trusting relationship, that's what we do. That's what she taught me my whole life. There's nothing held back. And so, you know, now that Trump's in the race, I'm the second most psychoanalyzed candidate in the race. I used to be first, but he's first now. I'm second. It's not bad to be second, on that at least. And people ask all the time, like, why does he say get the hell off the beach? Why did he say sit down and shut up? Why does he say the things that he says? Well, you know, now you know. It's her. It's her. That's what she taught me. That's who she taught me to be, and that's who I'm going to be. And so if you trust me and you make me president, you're never going to have to wonder what I'm thinking because you'll hear it. And you're never going to have to wonder what I'm feeling because you'll see it. And you'll never have to wonder how hard I'm willing to work for you because you'll have seen how hard I was willing to work to get there. And there'll be no mysteries between us. And there may be nights you just turn off the TV because you don't want to hear me anymore. I'll understand. I won't be offended. As long as you turn it back on some other time to hear me again. But you will never have to wonder what I stand for, what I'm willing to fight for. And I'm going to be fighting for this country because no other place in the world will give an opportunity to somebody like me to become president of the United States. And so make sure you know who it is you're voting for when you show up on caucus night. Because if you do, then we have a much better chance of succeeding. And I'm not only asking for your vote today, and I am asking for your vote, but I'm also asking for two other things, your trust and your confidence. See, your vote gets me to the White House, and that'll be great. But without your trust and your confidence, I won't succeed as president. So I want all three. So now, I'm tired of being in your top three, okay? I want to officially let you know that. It's now it's time to get down to first of three. That's what I'm asking for, and I hope that's what you'll give me on February 1st. Thank you very much.